Good morning, beloved warrior saints. Christ is in our midst. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. I am sure that at this point all of us know the tragic story that took place 2 weeks ago in Charlottesville, about how two groups of different people converged, if you will, in the same place, and there was anger and violence and hatred between two groups of people, and eventually leading to the tragic death of one young lady who was struck by a car. Headlines of racism and hate have dominated the news all since that terrible event, since that terrible day. It's been nothing about racism, nothing except being about racism and hatred and groups that are, dividing other people. The Orthodox Church in America, we have all of our bishops, not just the Antiochians, but all of the Orthodox bishops in this country have formed an assembly. And they made a very beautiful and very eloquent statement condemning racism and hate. They even went as far to say that racism is a heresy, right? A heresy is, in the Orthodox faith, the height of poor teaching. It is completely false teaching, right? That's what it means. It means that heresy means that anything that is taught that is completely and truly false, this is labeled as heresy. And they condemned racism as being heresy. The statement was beautiful, it was eloquent, they expressed love for all people. It was properly, I think, in some real sense, properly worded. I did, however, have a brief moment of pause when I read their statements about how, we have to hate racism. And I thought to myself, really, it's not an impressive statement. Because who doesn't think that racism is bad? I mean, who actually out there thinks that we should be inciting violence and hatred against another person because of a different color of skin, or a different religion, or a different mentality? To be sure, in the history of our country, this great nation, that was a problem. I mean, we didn't have the civil rights movement in the 60s for no reason. We didn't have President Lincoln ending slavery for no reason, right? Those things have existed. And to be sure, even today, some of those, that mentality still exists in the minds of some people. But upon, I think, honest and deep reflection, we will come to understand that racism in America today, a tragic, terrible thing, heresy, according to our church, but it's not quite the biggest problem that we have to be facing. I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. It's not the biggest problem, and I think we are being led into an arena where it becomes something that it is perhaps not quite. And what I mean by this. So I've been doing some research. The KKK is the notorious group that was a part of this fight in Charlottesville. Do you know how many there are in the United States of America? Between 5,000 and 8,000. That's it. I'm not saying that any of their mentality is good, but it's to say that, are we really going to allow this small number of people with aberrant thought to dictate our policy and the way we look at the world, right? I think that we can see that as we go out in the world and live our own lives, and we're blessed in Phoenix to be sure, we can see that type of thought out there is really about as small as that small percentage of KKK members in the Deep South, or the 8,000 people maximum, right? I think we can see that even in this particular parish, you are a great image about how racism is really not as big of an issue as we think anymore, right? It's an issue, don't misunderstand, but it is not something that dominates our headlines in our lives in this parish. We have people in this church right now who I am looking at who are from Lebanon, from Syria, from Palestine, from Jordan, from Mexico, from Russia, from Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Egypt. Shall I keep going? If I missed your country, forgive. But the point of it is, we can see that in this community, racism has no chance. Do you understand that? Because, and I'm coming to it, we will get to why it has no chance in this parish. To be sure, there are probably people who have racist thoughts in this parish, in this church right now. To be sure. But racism is not really the main issue. I think it's a distraction, and I'm coming to what I think it's distracting us from, right? I mean, if we want to think about things, what happened to any discussion about ISIS? What about the tragedies in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan? What happened to the Russia probe? There's some crazy dude over the sea with his button on a nuclear weapon. Where did that go, right? Are those of not greater import and greater fear for us than a small group, two small groups of people duking it out in Charlottesville? And again, I am not minimizing that. One person lost her life. But what I am saying is, I think it is a distraction that the world, the voice of culture today, is distracting us from really thinking in one specific Orthodox Christian warrior saint way. And I'm coming to it even closer. I think the distraction is to divide us. Postmodern neo-Marxism. We talk about it all the time. It has really one agenda. Well, there may be many sub-agendas, but the main goal of this voice of culture that we feel and fear today is about division. And you can see what they've done to us. They have made us into things. We're black or we're white. Or we're Mexican. Or Chinese. Or, you know what I mean? They're defining us by our roots, in what country we came from. We're Christians or Jews or Muslims or atheists. We're male or female, right? And they're putting us in boxes. And what they have made us into is that I am defining myself as a thing. And in my thingness, if your thingness is not the same as mine, I have therefore not only the right, but the responsibility to call you names and haters and racists and bigots and all of these things, right? This is what's happened. This is what this postmodern neo-Marxist movement is doing. It is a simple, really, it's a battle tactic. Divide and conquer, right? It's simple. And this is what's happening. And how many of us, and look, be honest with yourself, as you go out there, when you hear all of this noise from all of this news media stuff that's going on, talking to us about Charlottesville and all the tragic problems that we have in America with racism. By the way, you should invite them to St. George just to see that it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. But as we go out and think about all this noise, we begin to talk like that. And then I look at people as things. And I say it in my mind, even though it may be unconscious, even though I know I don't want to do that, even though I know I don't want to say those things, it is a seed that has been planted in our minds that they are watering and trying to give growth to make another person into a thing, right? And you can't really feel comfortable about striking another person, but you can strike a thing, right? It's hard to hate a person, but you can hate a thing. You see it. And if I can hate a thing, then I can move that thing out of the way so that I can then have my way. And this is what's happening. Open your eyes to that. Look in the world and you will see that I am not even close to being at all wrong in that statement. I don't say that arrogantly. I'm just saying you can see it if your eyes are open. And so that leaves us, warrior saints, with a different job, a different task, a different person to be. And that is that we must look at other human beings as a person, as people, and so that love may conquer. Let me teach about this a little bit. You know, in the Orthodox theology, we worship one God, the Trinity, who is three persons. And it's very important for us in Orthodox theology, we don't talk about the three individuals of the Trinity. We don't say that. We are very specific, and we say the three persons of the Holy Trinity. The person of the Father, the person of the Son, the person of the Holy Spirit. Why are we saying person versus individual? Because a person, by definition, has a relationship with another person, right? Individuals can be separated, taken over here and taken over there. Individuals can end up alone on islands. But persons, by definition and ultimately by necessity, have relationship with another person. And you know it, and you can feel it. In your own lives, you want, all of us want so bad to relate to another person. And in that relating to another person and becoming truly a person, we start to really fulfill to fulfill the gifts, the humanity within us that God gave us. Does that make sense? In that moment of relationship with another human being, we become truly human, truly children of God. And so for us as warrior saints, I'm going to give us 3 things to keep in our mind so that when we interact with things, we can make them into people, into persons, so that they are not things, but that they become people. And I think the first step, and this one sometimes is very hard. I know that it's hard for me too, especially when you're sitting in traffic or someone is giving you poor customer service and you want to get upset and angry with these people, and then you have stress in your life between other people, and all of a sudden the temptation is to get angry and name call and talk about how ignorant they are and all of these terrible things. And as we do that, we lose sight of the fact that this person in front of us, no matter how tragic they may be, and no matter how poorly they may be behaving, God made them, and God sent His only Son to die for them. Right? Like, look, ought to understand this, the idea of one son, right? One son. You would never give your son for anyone, let alone a bunch of sinners, right? You live on through your son and your name. You follow that? And yet God, in His great love, sent His only Son to die for all of us and all of those other people out there who we may have turned into things. Get this. This is tough. You know who God sent Christ to die for? The Orthodox Christians. You know who else He sent them to die for? The KKK. Jesus Christ came to save all of us, even the ones we don't like. And so if we can remember that, not justifying poor behavior, not justifying racism, at no point, but to remember in our mind that even though this person in front of me may actually be really annoying me, Christ loved them enough to die for them too, right? And if we can keep that in our mind, we recognize that that person has value to God and therefore should have value to me also. So most importantly, the first of the 3 steps, remember that that person is loved by God and Christ came to die for him. St. Paul uses the phrase in 1 Corinthians 8, the brother for whom Christ died. So number 1, remember the brother. Remember the sister in front of you who may not be your favorite person at the moment is worth the love of God and therefore worth our respect, compassion, and love also. The second thing is really a very, very simple thing. Call someone by their name. It's hard to make John a thing. It's hard to make Sally a thing, right? I can make someone who's in a group who I've shoved into a box a thing, but it's hard to make Phil a thing. Because Phil's a person. And what do you do to people? You talk with them. And sometimes it's uncomfortable because, there's this game where you've met someone and you've talked with them, and then it becomes too late to go back and ask them for their name again. You know that what I'm talking about? And then all of a sudden you have to sneak around, hey, what's his name again? You know that whole thing that we'd ask their name. Make them into a person. Don't be so arrogant that you think that, everyone's going to remember your name all of the time. If someone forgets your name and asks for it, give it to them. And be a person with them. Look, it's really simple. It's uncomfortable sometimes to do it, but when we begin to do that, think about it like this. My mind is racing. Even when you go to a restaurant and out to eat, you can see how quickly this happens. A human being comes up to serve you. They're called servers or waiters, waitresses, whatever the word is. They're there to serve you. That doesn't mean that they're your slave, right? So if the server doesn't introduce him or herself, ask for their name. You get better service too, by the way, right? Because you've made them into a human being. And human beings want to have a relationship with other human beings. Ask for someone's name and call them by the name. Name tags are placed on employees and businesses for a reason. Even maybe they don't get it, but in God's reason, it is to help us and them be persons. To follow, not persons, to be persons. Talk to somebody by their name. Number one, remember that Christ died for them and loves them. Number two, use their name. And number three, and this one I know is definitely a challenge. It's definitely hard for me too. I struggle with it. Even today, this morning, I already struggled with it. And this is really the height of what it means to be a warrior saint, to be someone who follows the gospel of Christ. That as we're communicating with someone by their name, remembering that Christ loved them enough to die for them, it is to remember in our minds to put their needs ahead of mine. That's a really hard one, because we're designed biologically. Our genetics, it's in us. Our DNA is designed to have us be self-preservative, to take care of myself. I mean, that's just how it is. To be all about me, what I need first. It doesn't even, sometimes we don't even think like that. It just happens because that's just how we're built biologically. The gospel is asking us to think anti-biologically in this sense, and to say, how can I put the needs of someone else first? How can I, even if that means the expense of what I may want, even if that means at the expense of what I may need or think is good or think is right, the brother or sister whose name is X or Y in front of me is someone whom Christ died for. How can I put their needs first? Parents get it. Parents get that. Those of you who are not yet parents, God willing, someday you will get that. You will understand that. And sometimes we lose sight of that in the rest of the relationships with the world. What I'm challenging us all is to constantly, and it's not a one and done, guys, it's constant. How can I put the needs of this person in front of me ahead of my own needs? Now, I promise you, if you do these three things, always be mindful that that person is loved by God and Christ died for them. Use their name to call them who they are. And finally, to put their needs ahead of your needs. That other thing in front of you, very quickly, very easily, very beautifully becomes a person. Becomes a person. A human being who is created in the image and likeness of God. And if we dedicate ourselves to this, even a group as small as us here at St. George in Phoenix, even if the 1,000 of us that belong to this parish make that part of our lives, we will have, tremendous is an understatement, a tremendous impact on the world. Don't think that racism will always exist. Well, let's say this. Racism and the like will always exist if people like us continue to allow the world to put other people in boxes and make them things. It will. But if all of us as warrior saints forget what others do, it's not about others, it's about you and I. If we live our lives as warrior saints, remembering that Christ loved them and died for them, calling them and communicating with them by their names and putting their needs ahead of us, we will make a powerful impact on the world. And perhaps one day, through a spark that starts from you beautiful people, racism really vanishes. I don't know. Sounds far-fetched, but I believe and I have faith. And I believe in you and I have faith in you that you can do these things. But it means that from this very moment, and I'm going to end right now, from this very moment until your last breath, that every single ounce of your energy, you dedicate yourself to turning someone in front of you from a thing into a person. My prayer, as always, is that our great God and Savior Jesus Christ blesses you, grants you the strength to hear the call of this gospel, and to walk in new life. Amen.